Welcome into another episode of Preacher in the Hat. My name is Eric. We've just been sitting around here for the last few minutes completely struggling and dumbfounded with how we were going to start this episode. And by we, I mean me. And so it started out with some random singing, some callbacks to sitcoms that people in the room had never heard before. Whatever Welcome Back was a popular one. So... welcome back. We have a super exciting episode in line for you today because we have another guest here in the studio. So please, in here, and for those of you listening and watching, please give it up for Valorie Gochnauer. Yeah.
It's good to be here.
If you will hang around to the end of the episode, and please do hang around, you will get to hear an original song from her that she was so kind to record for us for the podcast. It's called Not in a Hurry, and you don't want to miss it. So please stick around for the end, and we'll get into that. So last episode, we were originally going to have Valorie on last week. Instead, we recorded another episode due to some other circumstances. We recorded another episode called Hurry. And now we want to kind of piggyback off of that and get a little bit specific in talking about kind of living in the moment and being, digging into where God has you, like, right in the now. But before we do that, Valorie, we want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and also introduce one of the main reasons why we thought of you for this particular episode, and that is because of what you do for a living. So if you could give like an elevator pitch on your job, start with the title, and then give us an elevator pitch about what your job is. And then we'll let you dig in and explain a little further if you want.
Yeah. Well, my name's Valorie, and I've lived in Birmingham for about 5 years. Get to lead worship with Derek and Eric at our church. And for work, I'm a music therapist. So I work at a hospital here in town. And a lot of people don't know what music therapy is. It's one of like the most asked questions that I get. Mm-hmm. And so our elevator pitch for music therapy is that we just use music as a way to help patients and clients reach their goals. And those goals are typically non-musical. And that's kind of the part that's really important, is that we're using the music, but it's for a very specific goal within their care. And so I typically work in our inpatient rehab facility at the hospital. And so it's like with stroke patients, brain injury patients. And so I'm kind of helping them regain some of their function back after those incidents using music. So, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
I got to remember, I remember back to when you like first came to church, and I think at that time you were still in school, right? Or
I was in my internship.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that was the first time that I'd ever heard of music therapy. And I think that's kind of why you were here, is where you work now too. They have, or at that time they had one of the, not few, but I know like not every hospital is employing music therapy.
You were on ground floor
but
at this hospital. Were you not here in Birmingham with musical therapy?
No.
Music therapy?
Well, my internship was at one facility, and there was only one music therapist there.
Okay.
The place I work at now, there are 10 of us. So they've had music therapy since 1999.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm very blessed to have like a big team at
That's
that
great.
place. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
So you mentioned you kind of mentioned about how like people don't know a lot about music therapy, and then we just confirmed that when Derek was saying that the first time he ever heard of it was because that was your job.
Yeah.
And same for me. So with none of us really knowing a lot about it, we would sit here and like probably try to conceive a lot of ideas about what it means in our head. So like, what is a common misconception about that job?
I think the biggest one is that people just think that we go into patients' rooms and sing for them. and we just bring it because we
Okay,
normally
that is a
bring our
very
guitar.
common misconception because that's kind of what I thought the job was.
Well, you do sing for them, but that's not near the only thing
Yeah.
that happens.
Yes, yeah.
Apparently, yeah.
Because that's often what it does look like, is that we bring our guitar in the room, and we another misconception is that we like only play a specific kind of music. People often think I'm going to come in and play classical music.
So that's going to lead into my next question, and you probably know where it's going, but keep going.
But yeah, we always like to use what the patients prefer. It's often like what they grew up on, because those are the songs that are going to bring back those positive
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah.
But yeah, going in with like the fact that we don't just play music, it can be very clinical. There's a lot of research on like how music affects the brain, and so we try to kind of keep up with that. Like specifically with where I work, like just a few examples, because it's often like, what does it actually look like? So like a lot of times patients after a stroke, sometimes they will lose the ability to speak or lose some language function. But singing actually is kind of stored in different parts of the brain than just speech is. And so sometimes people like maintain their ability to sing even if they can't talk. And so in those instances, we'll go in and like sing really familiar songs with them to help them get some of that speech back. Or we'll put like a really simple phrase like, hello, my name is Jack, to a melody. And sometimes that helps those words come out a little bit easier. Or like, we'll just bring in different instruments and have them play the instruments, but it's not for the purpose of learning how to play the instrument. It's for the purpose of like regaining fine motor skills by playing the piano, or working on like balance by like playing a drum in different spaces or things like that. So being creative with how we structure.
You mean
our-
even drummers can do it? Like we have a drummer in
Hey,
the
hey,
room.
hey.
Even drummers can do it? Is that right?
What? Careful.
Is there some of it too that's kind of like palliative also? Because I know like you've seen the stuff where the lady with dementia gets up and like plays a song that she grew up playing on the piano or whatever.
Yes.
Is there like some of that aspect to it where you're kind of just like, I don't know, almost, just kind of giving them some moments of familiarity or...
Yeah, a lot of it is like just a lot of psychosocial support, because obviously being in the hospital is like the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
It's not a place that anyone wants to be. And so a lot of it is that we just get to be like humans with them and like create a space for them to maybe feel like themselves again. Or like you mentioned with patients that have dementia, or are experiencing like confusion in the hospital. Sometimes that familiarity through the song is what can help them feel a little bit more grounded and like reoriented to reality. But yeah, it's really special, because a lot of times when people, other healthcare providers in the hospital, they are only able to spend a few minutes with people, and they're,
Right.
poking and asking
Yeah.
questions and all these things, but we get the ability to kind of just sit there with them.
That's cool.
And kind of be there for whatever they need in that moment.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, so we've talked about this. I'm a worship leader, and I get requests, okay, for songs, and so a lot of them are great, and I can truthfully, honestly say that occasionally some of them are bad, like terrible requests. I know right off the bat that I'm never gonna do. But so I would love to hear the weirdest request for a song that you got.
Oh goodness.
And I have a good follow-up question for that.
The weirdest request.
Where
Weird request.
yeah,
You don't
or-
have to try
or
to
where
top
you're just
the-
kind of like, how am I going to do
Top 5,
this?
top 10.
Because they say like, I would really, really like it if you came back tomorrow and sang this song. Like, what's do you have one that triggers like in your mind?
The one that comes to mind is not a specific song, but it was the group of songs that really threw me for a loop. Because typically people stay within like a couple, like one or two genres that like make sense together.
Okay.
Like they like gospel and classic country, or they like, rock and roll and easy listening or something like that. But this one patient, she was maybe 50s, 60s. And I think the first song she asked for was like an old hymn.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And then she asked for Puff the Magic Dragon. The Magic Dragon.
Oops.
And I was like, okay, going some full
That
route.
took a turn. Yeah.
And then
Hey,
she
actually, I know that song. So I was going to sing it right after. Can we sing it for a moment?
No.
And then she really threw me for a loop when she asked for Black Eyed Peas. I got a feeling.
Did you do it? Do you remember if you did it?
I can't remember. I know I did the hymn. I don't think I knew Puff the Magic Dragon at that time.
Just call me the next time. I'll come.
You probably know.
You're
it
like,
now.
oh, I'm gonna have to call me.
I probably fumbled through the Black Eyed Peas songs.
Yeah.
I've heard it a bunch.
Yeah.
So
Preacher in the Hat sings Puff the Magic Dragon.
I don't think they have
That's
chord
just like a
sheets
really-
floating around out there for that.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's when you're gonna have to just big brain and do it all by ear. So that's actually a really good spot for me to plug in something that I meant to do at the start of the episode, but I got to flapping my gums and then just dove right into everything. So like I'm going to kind of lead into it a little bit differently and first ask, because it may be I kind of let everybody know what the question was going to be, but I'm going to like lead into that first by asking you, like, what's your, like, when you're in that setting, in your work setting, what's a song that like you love to hear requested, or like maybe, something like that, something that's really like, oh yes, that's awesome.
I mean, I really enjoy playing like older soul or Motown
Okay.
stuff. They're just fun to sing and people love them.
Nice.
My go-to at that is always some Commodore's Easy Like Sunday Morning.
Oh yeah,
It's just a
yeah.
nice chill song.
Uh-huh.
Puts people at ease.
Yeah.
You pick
And
it,
yeah,
right?
you're just picking
as
them.
opposed
Yeah,
to
it's got some fun
yeah,
chords.
Yeah,
Easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So then, question for the group then is, and hopefully get an answer from everybody on this. If you could only sing one, you were going to do karaoke one more time in your entire life, and you had like one song, and just to set the crowd on fire, what is your go-to song in that moment? Just tell us the song.
I got sunshine
All right.
on a cloudy day.
Chris is snapping out of
Yeah,
rhythm.
yeah. It's great. Okay.
When it's cold outside.
Derek.
I got the month of... Oh, sorry.
you sing that one sometimes?
All the time.
Well, there you see.
Yeah,
that.
I bet. You probably
You
should.
do it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you
I would
go.
probably go for complete broke and hope that they could change the key or something like that and go all out for September, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yes.
Or really just like,
Yeah.
because we're talking
See,
like,
I don't know that song.
I'm
Tell
only
me.
ever going to do this one more time.
This
Like
is
I
it.
got one shot
This is it.
to like try,
Yeah.
like I'm going for it
Yeah,
all.
okay.
And it might be horrible.
Yeah.
But either way, people are going to talk about it
Yeah.
for the rest
Okay,
of their lives.
okay.
So
Valerie.
Okay, mine. I unashamedly grew up on a lot of like Disney Channel music and
Okay.
movies, and so I have a very soft spot in my heart for the Jonas Brothers, which is
okay.
a very specific
I-
age range.
I
I
was
know.
not-
Yeah. That's all right. That's all right.
So not everyone would know it, but their song "Burning Up" is probably my favorite to sing.
Okay.
Interesting. I would not have pegged that at all.
Yeah,
I
me
know.
neither.
Like that's honestly kind of surprising to me.
Yeah.
I would have to. I would probably have to go with "In the Air Tonight" by Phil Collins, just for the air drum solo, just like because it just it hits so hard. So,
So what about Mr. Producer? Like, can we hear from Mr. Producer?
Yeah.
What,
Would you? What's
what
your?
would be yours, Mr. Producer? Let's hear it. Oh, you don't have to sing it then.
no. What's
Addicted, yeah.
Addicted.
Who's that by? He doesn't even know.
Nah, he's having to look it up.
Oh, that's terrible. He's having to look it up.
Dan Seals.
Dan, what?
Dan Seals.
Dan. Seals.
Dan Seals, "Addicted" by Dan Seals is what Chris would go.
okay.
All right, a little more obscure there. I
Yeah,
feel like.
quite a bit. So then all those were great answers. I asked you like, or we asked you, or asked you like, what's something that like, hit really good. That when people request them, but how many like a day, like how many songs are you singing?
Oh, goodness. That's a good question. I guess it depends on the day and what I'm working on with people. But probably between like 15 and 20,
Ooh, okay.
I would say. Yeah.
It's gotta at some points tax the voice. Yeah.
I remember a couple times specifically when, I don't remember when this was, but you came up to me on a couple of different Sundays and were like, hey, it'd be great if I didn't have to lead a song next Sunday. It's just like, it's work has been like crazy. You're like, oh yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah.
But it's just like one more time where you gotta go for it when you're doing that 5 days a week. Yeah, that's.
In like when I was trying to figure out how exactly I wanted to approach like this kind of question, because when you're going into a room, you kind of mentioned how like hospitals are like the last place anybody wants to be, and that's certainly true. I know it's definitely true for me, and that like I'm not even like really comfortable visiting people in the hospital. Like that's just
You're
kind of
just ready to get out.
Yeah,
regardless.
yeah. So there's a lot of people that you see are feeling that exact same way, and so like what. When a moment's like when you go into a moment like that maybe feels like where it's really anxious, or they're not feeling a lot of hope, like maybe this is too intimate of a question, but like how have you experienced like God impacting you, like what you're doing in that room, like in a moment that like where you just walk in, it just feels like dead.
Yeah. It is interesting because like when I was thinking about like the topic of this podcast, and kind of like what I mentioned before of how like our job is very clinical, and I can sometimes kind of just like get in that mode of like we're going in, we're seeing them, like trying to assess like what they need. But I feel like sometimes I do have to kind of like take a step back, like when I know I'm going into a really, like you said, like very maybe dark session, and be like, hey God, like I don't know what I'm walking into, but like help me just like really like be there for them in this moment in whatever way I can be, and like help me to see like how they're feeling and what they're going through. So I think we can be very like self-centered sometimes and just like focus on what we're doing. And to like when you see people in a dark place, what you want to do is like try to pull them out of it, right?
Yeah.
And try to encourage
Yeah.
them and like tell them like it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay. But sometimes what people need most in those moments is just someone to like actually just be there with them and like validate how they're feeling, and just kind of like be that person and be like, yeah, like this is hard. And I think sometimes it does take me just like taking a step back and being, okay, God, like help me just to like see how they're seeing and like, just to not try to like rush forward in this, and try to get to the results I want to see in them. Cause sometimes it does take a while cause you can't get people to where they want to be just by like telling them something. Or,
You're just
Yeah.
like you kind of want to be there to fix it, but you're definitely not there to fix it.
yes.
Yeah.
I've often wondered if music is like what I'd call universal comfort song. I mean, like kind of a universal comfort thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think across cultures, even a lot of times, it's just to hear a song is comforting many times to me, and I think it is to a lot of people. And as a pastor, being with people, by their bedside, even as they are dying, and so forth, sometimes just singing. I knew a hospice chaplain, and he was known as a singing chaplain. When he would go into into homes and so forth, James Messer was his name, and he was known here, was in the Birmingham area, as just a singing chaplain. He would take a songbook in with him, and that's what he would do. He didn't try to talk a lot. He would just sing songs that were familiar to them. He would try to find out what was familiar to them, much like what you do, and just assess where they are and let them say it. And then he would say, and I would hear people say of some of the families, that it was just comforting just to hear a song.
Yeah.
And so, especially if it was familiar.
Yes.
But not always. It didn't always have to be familiar. So I often think about it, music is like the universal language of comfort to me.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about that recently with your dad too. When he passed away just a few months ago, he was kind of in a state where he wasn't talking much at all,
right.
showing much emotion, really just kind of almost there. He was just there. Was
right.
kind of, I guess, a way to put it. And we've got that picture of that his wife Louise took when you were singing him that song over the phone. Showing some emotion and some tears. And I think you really kind of even then, like, it brought him back to somewhere else.
And it was a song that was familiar to him, but it was also a person singing the song
that made a difference as well.
Too. One of his favorite Southern gospel singers, because he and I kind of got it from him, but we thought that Southern gospel music is the language of heaven. So well, there's not agreement about that in this room necessarily, but
That's okay.
But it's okay. But so it really was for him, and I knew that song, particular song, would be one. Come home at supper time, and we've talked about that on the podcast before. But it was comforting, but connected.
Yeah.
At the same time, he did cry some. It looked like he was crying, and you could see the emotion in him by video and by picture that I saw.
I'm something that amazed me, and when your brother passed away, was it was kind of, because we've been talking about, like, Valorie going in, and other people going in. You mentioned that other guy, and like trying to just be there, comfort, that sort of thing. And I feel like when your brother's our Uncle Daryl passed away, he had some time where he knew death was coming.
Yes.
But I feel like he did the opposite.
Then to receive comfort,
So,
he gave it.
like, we all went in there and got that from him.
Yeah,
as
crazy.
I'm just going to pass that off to you.
I'm with you. Dying of bladder cancer, his oncologist had told him he had 2 to 3 weeks to live, and said, we maybe can help you a little bit here in the hospital, but if we do, the most you would live probably be a month. But he said, we can send you home on hospice, and you'll have the best 2 weeks of your life. And during that time, Valorie, and the rest of you, that in the hospital and at home, we counted 100 different people that saw him in 2 weeks, and came in, and he did that very thing. He would challenge us. He would comfort us. He did it with his family, all of us as siblings. The Sunday, 10 days before he died, we sat around in a circle, and he went around to everybody and told them what he appreciated about them and that kind of thing. It was unbelievable. In the middle of all that, since one of our themes is music, though, is he had a playlist. And there were certain songs on his playlist that we also played at times when there was not people there that he was talking to. So it was also, there was moments where he was receiving and so forth. He had a list of people in his mind, apparently, that he wanted to talk with. And we tried to make sure that all those people got to be there. Maybe 1 or 2 by phone, but not much. I remember his sister and my sister Sylvie. She played a song for him after he became unconscious, and it was a hymn about a song about heaven. And we didn't see a lot of visible response, but that was only in the 24 hours. He was conscious up until 24 hours before he passed away. But he talked to you, Eric. I know he talked to you, Derek. He talked to young, to old, to Chris. I know he talked to you too, and just listening to him. I know Chris got some of it on audio too, just to hear him. Now he could sing a little bit, but he wasn't a musician. But his words were like music, really, in many ways, and they were words of challenge and church and words of blessing. And I think a lot of times music's like that. It challenges me, but it also blesses me too at the same time. So, that experience. But back to the thing about hurry that we talked about last podcast.
Yeah.
He didn't seem to be in a hurry. And after he had talked to almost everybody on a Sunday afternoon, he died on early Wednesday morning, early Tuesday morning. I looked at him and I said, Daryl, I don't think there's anything else for you to do. It's okay for you to go. And he burst into tears, just he and I there alone. And he burst into tears a little bit and he started crying. I thought, oh boy. I said, so what are you feeling? He said, I feel numb. And I said, good numb, bad numb. He said, good numb. And he was at peace that he had done everything he do to give the comfort that you talked about, Eric, earlier. The things he was giving us, he felt like he had done everything, and now it was his time to finish up and to receive. And it's just it's unbelievable that it was unhurried in that moment. He didn't seem like he was, trying to get everything done, but it was unhurried. It was relaxed on the one hand, but it was very, very intense and challenging on the other.
One of how we got around to this episode, and we've mentioned this song going all the way back to our Streetlights series, there's a song by Benjamin William Hastings called Homeward.
That's right. And
there's a line in that song that says, what if where you want me is exactly where I am? Yeah. And when I think about my Uncle Daryl, and that line, like what kind of courage it must take to understand that being on your deathbed is exactly where God wants you to be. And he did. He understood that.
And then 15 minutes before he died, homeward, he had not been conscious for about 24 hours. He was under a lot of morphine and so forth. And while laying in his bed, and he'd been doing it, had not been awake, suddenly, about 11:40 that night, Dan and Mickey Graber were there, Lenore and I were there, your mom and so forth. Heidi and Tiana, his daughters, were there. And all of a sudden, he sat up in his bed, Valorie. You knew him, you'd met him. He sat up in his bed, and he held his arms just like this. And he was trying to tell me something. He had an eager look in his eyes. He was not fearful. He was not in pain. But he looked like he wanted to tell me something. And I so much wanted him to talk. And I said, Daryl, it's okay, buddy. Tell me something. You want to tell me something, tell me. But he couldn't. His speech wasn't forthcoming in terms of a clear picture. Later on, I was talking to God about this, and I said, why, I wanted him to talk to me. And this is what I thought I understood from God in that moment. It was, some of those things are not for you to know right now. He's experiencing something that's yet for you to know. Mm-hmm. But I really think he was going home. Yeah. And he knew it. And he wanted me to know it and wanted to know. We had talked about what that moment might be like. And he had those. And 15 minutes later, he was gone.
we're known for like complete whiplash on this podcast between like serious and I promise you, like, this is going to sound like the most unbiblical comparison that I could possibly give and completely change
And we're
the
all
R,
good.
but I promise it's not.
Go
okay?
right ahead.
I was watching yesterday. My son has been sick, and he wanted to watch Super Mario.
Super Mario.
Okay, so there's a Mario Brothers movie. I don't know. Have you seen it, Valerie?
seen it.
Okay, but it's a good movie, anyways. And it's really fun, and he loves watching. Well, so the whole theme of this movie is they're trying to defeat this character. If you've ever played Mario, Bowser, right? He's the turtle. He's like the big turtle.
Yeah.
And Mario and his now buddy Donkey Kong, which they were enemies at first, but now they're buddies.
Oh boy.
They are trying to save. Bowser is trying to destroy this kingdom called the Mushroom Kingdom. Okay, I promise you, this is going somewhere.
I'm thinking Uncle Daryl would probably enjoy this, but go ahead.
And yeah, he would.
He's gonna break.
And they're literally Donkey Kong and Mario are riding a rocket, and they look up and they say, "That's where they are. We need to get up there." And they're like, "Okay, boom." They're heading up there, but the little turtle guys in Bowser's army, they're on this wall and they see him and they shoot down the rocket. Okay, so they fall down to the ground, and and if you're familiar with Mario, they've got the little question mark boxes. It's always a power up, right? And so they see these turtles gathering all of these power up bottles. Now they're on the ground and they see them gathering up and they're trying to destroy them or do something or collect them. I'm not sure. And Donkey Kong, or no, Mario looks at Donkey Kong and he's like, "You ready to do this?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." And they get going and they start grabbing these power ups and they're working their way through these turtles, trying to get back up to to the sky, basically. And I was literally watching this yesterday when God was like, "Hey, I'm going to show you something," and I was like, "I'm sorry, what?"
Super Mario movie. Here comes
Yeah.
God, right? Okay, I got you.
But as they're on the ground, okay, and they're trying to get up there, they collect all these power-ups, they lose them, they get knocked down, they get another one. And right before they're trying to get back up there, Mario gets this power-up that helps him to be able to fly. It's some little suit or something like that. I don't know. But they're able to like ride that up to the city and so they get back up there, and this little suit that he's wearing helps. Like, if he's not wearing that, they wouldn't have defeated Bowser in the end. All right, so he's able to fly down, save his brother who was in chains and being like dropped into this pit of fire and all this stuff, and he does all of that. And God, and I'm like, all right, this is what are you doing? Like, because God's teaching me something through this. And he's like, without that, if they had not been knocked off the rocket, they would not have had what they needed at the top to do what needed to be done. And I think so many times we see like the end result that we really, really want, like whatever that is, success, like, I don't know, whatever that means for you. And we want to take the rocket ship to the top and just get there. And we want to see that end.
Yeah.
But without going through the journey to get back up, God's building things in us that we're going to need for when we get there. Yeah. And that's one of the things that you appreciate about people like what Daryl did.
That's right.
Was that he didn't just say, "Well, they gave me 2 weeks. See y'all."
That's right.
He got back down on the ground and said, "Let's do this," and encouraged people and gave them things that they needed while he was still there.
And he said to all of us, "I don't want to lay my weapons down, but apparently I'm going to have to. You have to take mine up with yours." He challenged us to do that. That was his words to all of us. So he gave everything God had built into him all those years, and he battled cancer for 40 years, skin cancer most of the time. But yet God had built so much stuff in him so that at the end he had what you're talking about. That is really cool. Super Mario kind of fits, I think. That's good. Good job.
I thought it was good.
Good job.
It was better.
And
than,
Uncle Darrell would approve, by the way.
Yeah, it was better than a shoe. It wasn't shoehorned. It fit
It
in
does give you
nicely.
whiplash.
Yeah, you were right about the whiplash.
Yeah,
That's true. We probably completely just like dismantled like the direction Valerie felt like we were heading, and it's like,
Not the first
it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard for you to plug in here at some point in that conversation. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I was struggling to keep it together during that, trying to figure out exactly where you're going because I've seen that movie a number of times, thanks to my son Nate. And you said God's going to show me something here, and I'm imagining that scene just like you were when he said that to you, and I'm like, I don't know what
I don't get this.
I don't know, no idea where this is going, no idea where this is going. But yeah. Thank y'all so much for the discussion, Valerie. I think all of this conversation together and not just what you said, I think gives us all like a really cool look into like not only what you do, but like just kind of addition to what you like the stuff you were saying, Dad, like into like that mindset of like of being in those moments, and then and really just sticking in there and staying and doing what God has called us to do.
And we had a sneak peek at the lyrics of her song that we're probably going to hear here in a little bit.
Absolutely, you will.
And I would say that our discussion is a really good lead up to that. Even if there's some whiplash involved. But yeah, I'm excited to hear your song because I think it puts a cap on what we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And so if you take anything away from this, no matter where you're watching or listening, we want you to understand that God has something for you in the moment that you're in. Maybe what's coming next is important, but God really is really wanting us, I think, to focus on the time that we're in right now, because that's the only thing we can do anything about is that moment right now. So your takeaway is to not be in a hurry. And so for Derek and Steve, our special guest Valerie, Chris behind the cameras, I'm Eric. This has been Preacher in the Hat, and this is Not in a Hurry by Valorie Gochnauer. We'll see you next time.
We're not in a hurry, just waiting for the sun, where time moves slowly. I'm trying not to think of all the possibilities, 'cause what could have been won't change a thing. And where I wanna be is where I'm at right now. We're not in a hurry, just finding space to be, learning every breath I have is a gift to me. So why should I worry? Why should I fear if you're watching every sparrow? I know you're here. And where I even when the sun's not shining, doesn't mean that you and I are far. I'm learning that there's always hope, and sometimes trust it looks like letting go. But this heart, it always strives, forgetting what it means to simply abide. So lead me to the flowers again, so I can see that they don't toil